something I've noticed. This is like an addendum. No, I don't know. I don't know what it's called. We're going to add this, we're going to tack this on to the study series. The 17th century, right? It's weird how it's 1601. Not 1600. 1601 to 1700. Vital shit was really going on then. So keeping in mind with Paradise Lost's writing and the idea of John Milton himself, what triggered this was Francis Bacon. I think he did his first writings in the 1592 is his first writing. Letter to My Lord Treasurer, Burglary, sorry. And then 1597 to 1625, he has essays on the civil and moral, councils of the civil and the moral. This man right here, Sir Francis Bacon, was he Sir Francis or was it just Francis Bacon? Philosophy. Moving forward with human philosophy. Because here's what I was thinking there too. I was thinking this. Bacon's ideas, it says, particularly those outlined in his works, Novum Organum, emphasizes the importance of observation, experimentation, and inductive reasoning in the pursuit of knowledge. He argued for a new method of inquiry that relies on empirical evidence and reject the reliance on tradition, authority, metaphysical explanations. Empirical methods. Bacon called for the empirical method. Bacon's philosophy and the scientific revolution that followed him played a significant role in the border transformation of how people perceive the world, moving from a more religious and metaphysical worldview to one that relies on observation, reason, and the scientific method. As I was kind of stating before, in this 17th century, we're moving from tradition and religion and this pureness, in a sense, of how everything came to be. And now because of a man like this, who in his time was probably well received and not well received at the same time, we have adding to it more of like this turbulence. So like right here, here's like a summarization of the 17th century. Was a period of unceasing disturbance and violent storms in literature, politics, and society. The Renaissance had prepared a receptive environment essential to the dissemination of ideas of the new science and philosophy, like we were saying. So it's a new understanding. We're talking about shift from God to man. I'm thinking is what's happening here. The great question of the century was Michael de Montaigne. I don't know how to say that. Montaigne. What do I know? Was the great question of that century by this guy named Michael. What do I know? Why did I say it like that? What do I know? Or, in expanded terms, and the ascertainment of grounds and relations of knowledge, faith, reason, and authority in religion, metaphysics, ethics, politics, economics, natural science. The period began with the ending of the Tudor dynasty and the rise of the Stuarts. In the middle of the century, the Civil War and execution of Charles I saw Puritanism take hold. After Charles I's restoration of the throne of 1660, a new period of decadence began, and the Jacobean period saw luxurious and exotic materials brought to Britain for the first time. The Restoration was a time of great artistic flamboyancy. Okay. It said that, I almost call him Joseph. It said that Mr. fucking Milton here, didn't it say he began his writings in 1661-ish? When was that? Sorry. The first version was published in 1667. After King Charles II was restored to the throne, like some 9 years before. So there was this period here in his life where it was going really crazy, and man and God were kind of becoming mixed. And the rise of the Puritans was that like a, do you think that maybe the rise of the Puritans was an answer to the kind of this era of philosophy? Let's wonder that. It says Puritanism was a religious and cultural movement within Protestantism that had been developed since the late 16th century, particularly in England and later in the American colonies. While Puritanism and the rise of modern science coincided, they were distinct and largely unrelated phenomena. Puritanism was characterized by a strict and literal interpretation of the Bible. So being strict about it. Very strict. A focus on personal piety, moral purity, and the belief in predestination. Puritans sought to reform and purify the Church of England of what they considered to be the remnants of Catholicism and other perceived corruption. They emphasized a devout and disciplined approach to religious life. You know, in my mind, what that does is that kind of echoes, again, God to man. It sounds like Puritanism is really focused more on man inside of the religion. The religion's like this thing that they have to enter the room of, but it's all about the one individual, and as it says here, their personal piety and moral purity. That's the most important aspect. So the way you are, the way that you are perceiving your world, and how you are to God, matters more the fact than God and the religion in and of itself. It sounds to me like philosophy and religion were both going into this self-love kind of self-realization, self-discovery, but also, how would I word that? Ego. I'm not saying ego was never born before that, but this period here sounds like, as a mass consciousness, again, not the creation of ego, but it sounds like ego was this major movement here. I mean, the examples are the modern philosophy, well, at that time, what would be considered the modern philosophy, modern Puritanism, and then this idea of the Oliver Cromwell and the Stuart era. Let's look up why did... Alright, Oliver Cromwell's rise against the English crown was primarily driven by a complex set of political, religious, and military factors that culminated to the English Civil War and the subsequent overthrow of the monarchy. Here are some reasons. Religious conflict. One of the central causes of the English Civil War was a religious divide in England. So, okay, Cromwell was a devout Puritan, a member of a strict and reformed faction within Protestantism. King Charles I's religious policies, which were seen by many Puritans as moving towards Catholicism. Oh wow, so it was really about being a Puritan. And his imposition to the religious practice on Scotland led to widespread discontent amongst Puritans. No shit. So the religious aspect is that this Cromwell motherfucker saw this opportunity of their Puritan movement being, if it was indeed a movement that was rising up, being threatened by the Church of England because of some of this Catholicism that they still practiced. What they were against in Catholicism we'll have to really look into. I'm not really sure what about Catholicism the Puritans wouldn't like. But as I'm looking at this more and more, it's got me thinking. Charles II was put back on the throne, right? After the Civil War and all that shit, after Cromwell and all that crap happened. What if this is a response to that? This right here. So, your religion may say this, this, and that, but here, I can prove to you that the souls of man are forever kind of at battle with the devil. And the devil has been kind of made, so far, as a more humanish kind of element. As in having these expressed feelings of anger and frustration and betrayal. And so it's really taking this idea of religion and putting it into this context and saying, us. So instead of this Catholic belief of forgiveness It's internal damnation for the failures of man. Maybe that's what's kind of happening here. That's insane. Puritans left for America. Other Puritans stayed, and there was an uprising here, and there was a civil war, and the fucking king was killed, but then he was put back on the crown in the 1660s. Then shortly after that, this book was written. I think it's some things to think about, honestly. Like this is like, and we're gonna add this on to the last video there. I'm kind of in shock by that, actually. Very interesting. The books, it has to be a response of self. I mean, we're talking about an era here that is purely motivated by mankind. Not like it never was before. You know, we don't have a huge context as before. We're not historians, you know. Why do I keep saying we when I should say me? I'm not a historian, so I don't have, like, well, the political atmosphere of the world. Like, I don't know shit, clearly, as you watch. But I am sensing that this period here, this tumultuous, turbulent time, this violent storm in literature, politics, and society, created the divide of God and man. That's what it seems to have created, and from that point, we move forward. Now, I haven't investigated later on, but as we do know, later on in history, when it comes to the French Revolution, when it comes to even further into, like, however many hundreds of years before after that, we think about World War I, and we think about the transition of monarchies and you know, oligarchies and this and that, and into dictatorships and into communism and democracy or other made up fucking bullshit. We're starting to see the walking away of this lineage kind of understanding. And God knows who's shifting that balance, but we're going a little ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the 17th century. The time, it was just people needed to hold themselves and the ones around them accountable. We have the political opposition. So Cromwell, and along with other parliament and military leaders, came to represent a growing faction that opposed King Charles's policies and sought to curtail his power. The conflicts between king and parliament led to a series of confrontations, which escalated to full-scale war. And they eventually executed him. The reason for that were issues over taxation and his belief of the divine right of kings to rule without parliamentary oversight created a constitutional crisis. Cromwell and many members of parliament believed in a more limited and parliamentary monarchy, which clashed with Charles's. See what I'm saying? It's like we're moving from man, like, okay. For the longest time, human beings had this idea. It appears to me, again, I'm not a historian, for the longest time they had the idea that there was these chosen people by some sort of God, depending on what God we're talking about here. God-given kings, God-chosen kings, God save the king. These people that are divinely placed there, and this has been going on since like way back, like when Diodorus Siculus was talking about the pharaohs in Egypt. They were chosen by God. They were a fucking God. You know what I mean? That belief system is what I was talking about before, where it's like a head of a consciousness. And that idea of that consciousness is animated by the mass of people. Well, there was some sort of shift that needed to happen starting at this point here. And we could say, like, this is when the Illuminati and the Freemasons were getting, you know, in power, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that kind of shit. I haven't, you know, gone too far in it. I know the Masons claim some similar events that had happened or people that they had connections with, but I don't know yet. But as I look more at this time, as much as I possibly can, English Civil War, that needs to be fought not only for religious conflict with the Puritanism and the Catholicism, and then that idea, which is stemmed from this constitutional idea of like, no, we should have our own individual freedoms. That individual freedom that they want to secede from Parliament, from King Charles, echoes the Puritan belief that was stated before. Puritanism was characterized by a strict and literal interpretation of the Bible, a focus on personal piety, moral purity, and the belief in predestination. What is predestination? Predestination is a biblical doctrine that states that before the creation of the world, God decided the eternal destiny of all rational creatures, including humans and angels. It refers to God's choice to save certain sinners by grace, called election, and his choice to leave certain sinners to the damnation they deserve. You get what you get. Okay. Predestination is explicitly biblical doctrine that seeks to address that paradox of free will. Okay, so see what I'm saying? It seems like it's really echoing the idea of individualism and the free will. We can answer that. You do have free will, but there are consequences from God. And God damn it, John Milton's going to write a little fucking story to show you this. In the narrow sense, predestination refers to the election of all who will be saved, while in the broader sense it refers to all things, including God's plan and the crucifixion of Christ. It is related to the concept of omnipotent, meaning God knows everything. I can't say if this is an answer to individualism or something that was kind of jumped on with it, if that makes any sense. Man, a lot of shit stirring right now. So I can't believe that okay, so I guess in a sense, John Milton wrote Paradise Lost perhaps because of his sensation that, his feeling that Puritanism is the right way, holding people accountable for their actions, and having the doctrine of predestination. And that doctrine means everything has been predetermined, and you'll be judged for that. So certain sinners to the damnation they deserve, and blah blah blah, retrobation. It seeks to address the paradox of free will, right? Which is kind of coming from this idea. We have Francis Bacon here talking about shit like describing the philosophy to understand things like of ambition, of suitors, of the true greatness of kings and estates. No body can be healthful without exercise, neither natural body nor politic. And certainly to a kingdom or a state, and just and honorable war is a true exercise. A civil war indeed is like the heat of a fever, but a foreign war is like the heat of exercise, and severeth to keep the body in health, for in a slothful peace both courage will effeminate and manners corrupt. He's starting to, we're building on the idea, essentially, that man is choosing his own destiny. Man is choosing his own free will. Man is choosing to understand himself deeper and deeper. This man here, Francis Bacon, was saying we need to start thinking. We need to start being empirical about how we understand things. We need to start giving this scientific questioning of the world around us. And he's showing that each individual mind is determining its own free will, and there must be a guiding factor that this cannot give in some sense, in some way. I'm not saying he wasn't religious, because he probably was. But there was something limiting in this understanding from the Catholic Church that man, John Milton, himself also did not agree with. I don't know how John Milton felt about Francis Bacon. I have no fucking idea. But I do know that after everything was said and done and Oliver Cromwell and all that bullshit settled, and then King Charles II, I think it said, was put back on the crown, only a few years later, less than 10, this was created. The Puritan idea and the answer to free will. So that could be the main reason that John Milton chose to write this story. Now, the reason that it was so important for me to answer this going forward is I need to know where the man's mind is as I find these new pages. This was not written by God. Or was it? Because God can write through us, I suppose. But this was written, dictated by a man. A man that has seen a lot of pain, a lot of struggling, and much death around him. I mean, think of the time he grew up in. He lost a couple wives, he lost a child, he lost his sight. His whole world, which was this beautiful understanding of religion, almost was crumbling apart near the end of his life, the last 10 to 15 years of his life. And he decided to write this story here to exercise the idea of the dangers, most likely, I don't know, of free will. Maybe that's where we're at. Sorry if it was all confusing, but this just kind of was fluttering around in my mind and I had to get it out, you know. I'd like to hear other thoughts on that, if at all possible. Someone make a fucking comment! No, but it's cool, man. Make a comment, say something, I don't know. I need to be like reined in sometimes. I feel like I might be going crazy here and I need someone to be like, dude, chill out, that you're way off, you're overthinking this, like blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay. So I'm more than happy to hear an opposing, wow, an opposing position to what I'm suggesting here, which I don't think is too crazy. I'm just saying it's a fluctuous time and a lot of crazy shit was going on in the Puritan belief and the free will, and like I don't think it's too nuts, but maybe it is. I don't know. Next video, we're gonna look at those key words page by page.